Damien stared at the empty penthouse, Christina's wedding ring glinting on the marble counter beside signed divorce papers. 90 days exactly, their contract fulfilled. His fake wife vanished without a trace. Security cameras showed nothing. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Even his private investigators found dead ends. The billionaire CEO, who controlled everything, couldn't find the one person who'd made his hollow life real. Then his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. 3 months earlier, Damien Hartland sat behind his mahogany desk on the 42nd floor of Heartland Industries, watching his empire crumble in real time. The hostile takeover bid from Elizabeth Fairmont had blindsided him. She'd somehow acquired 30% of his company's shares without triggering any alerts. His phone buzzed incessantly, with calls from board members, investors, and journalists hungry for blood. "Sir, your father is here," Linda Jefferson, his assistant, announced through the intercom. Her voice carried that particular tension reserved for Robert Hartland's unscheduled visits. Damien straightened his tie and steeled himself as his father swept into the office like a storm front. Robert Hartland, 73 and still intimidating, commanded every room he entered. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his custom suit immaculate, and his disappointment in his only son palpable. "Explain to me," Robert said without preamble, settling into the leather chair across from Damien's desk, "how a woman half your age outsmarted my brilliant son." "Elizabeth Fairmont used shell companies and offshore accounts," Damien replied evenly. "Her moves were carefully coordinated over 18 months. She's not just half my age. She's ruthless." Robert's steel-gray eyes, so similar to Damien's own, narrowed. "And now she's demanding a board seat and threatening to dismantle everything we've built." "I'm handling it." "Are you?" Robert leaned forward. "Because from where I sit, you're losing. The board is already whispering about your leadership. Fairmont is painting you as an unstable playboy who can't be trusted with a multinational corporation." Damien's jaw tightened. The playboy reputation had followed him since his messy breakup with Victoria Summers 3 years ago. She'd sold his company's secrets to a competitor, cost him millions, and somehow convinced the media he was the villain in their story. "What do you suggest?" Damien asked, though he suspected he already knew. "Stability, marriage, an heir." Robert's words hit like bullets. "The board wants to see you settled, committed to building a legacy instead of chasing women who betray you." "I'm not getting married to appease a bunch of investors." "Then you'll lose everything." Robert stood, straightening his cufflinks. "I'm 73, Damien. This company is my life's work, and I won't watch it die because you're too proud to do what's necessary. Find a wife, show the world you're a man they can trust with their investments, or I'll start considering Fairmont's proposals myself." The threat hung in the air long after Robert left. Damien stared out his floor-to-ceiling windows at the city below, watching ant-sized people navigate their ant-sized problems. Unlike him, they probably didn't need to acquire a wife like a business asset to save their life's work. His intercom buzzed. "Sir, Miss Fletcher is here for the 3 o'clock financial consultation." Damien frowned. He'd forgotten about the meeting entirely. Some consulting firm had recommended this woman to analyze Heartland Industries' defense strategies against the hostile takeover. Normally, he'd handle such matters internally, but desperate times called for fresh perspectives. "Send her in." The woman who entered his office was nothing like he'd expected. Christina Fletcher moved with quiet confidence, her natural hair styled in soft curls that framed an intelligent face. She wore a navy business suit that managed to be both professional and flattering to her curves, and when she smiled, it reached her warm brown eyes in a way that made Damien forget his troubles for exactly 3 seconds. "Mr. Hartland," she said, extending her hand, "thank you for making time." Her handshake was firm, professional, but when their skin touched, something electric passed between them. Damien found himself holding her hand a fraction longer than necessary, studying the way her eyes widened slightly at the contact. "Please, sit." He gestured to the chair his father had vacated. "I understand you have insights about Fairmont's strategy." Christina opened her tablet, her fingers dancing across the screen with practiced efficiency. "I've analyzed her acquisition pattern. She's not just buying shares, She's targeting specific investor blocks with personal connections to your family's history. Damien leaned forward, intrigued, despite himself. Explain. Your grandfather's original partners, the families who helped establish Heartland Industries in the 1950s, their descendants still hold significant shares through trust funds and inheritance. Fairmont has been systematically approaching them with emotional appeals about returning the company to its founding principles. She's using nostalgia as a weapon. Exactly, and it's working because these families see you as a departure from your grandfather's values. Thomas Heartland was a family man, a pillar of the community. You're seen as, Christina paused, choosing her words carefully. An irresponsible playboy, Damien finished flatly. A brilliant businessman who hasn't demonstrated long-term commitment to family values that these traditional investors hold dear. Her diplomatic phrasing didn't soften the blow. Damien stood and walked to his windows, his hands clasped behind his back. So I need to become a family man overnight. That would certainly neutralize her emotional appeals. Christina's voice was thoughtful. Traditional investors respond to stability, legacy, continuity. A wife, particularly one with a strong reputation and clear moral character, would signal that you're building for the future, not just maximizing quarterly profits. Damien turned to study her. Christina Fletcher was clearly brilliant. Her analysis was more insightful than anything his internal team had produced. She was also beautiful in a way that seemed effortless, without the calculated perfection of the women who usually populated his social circle. And where would I find such a paragon of virtue on short notice? He asked. Christina's smile was wry. I assume someone with your resources could locate a suitable candidate. What if I already have? The words escaped before he'd fully formed the thought. Christina's fingers stilled on her tablet, and when she looked up, there was wariness in her eyes. Mr. Heartland, I'm not sure I understand. Damien moved closer, his mind racing with possibilities. You're intelligent, articulate, clearly moral, given your volunteer work with financial literacy programs. You understand business, which means you'd be credible to investors, and you're beautiful enough to convince people I'd marry for love, rather than strategy. Christina stood abruptly, taking a step back. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? A business arrangement. A contract marriage. You don't know anything about me. I know you're brilliant. I know you need money. Your consulting rates are below market value, which suggests you're building clientele rather than maximizing income. I know you care about people. Your financial literacy work is volunteer. And I know you're not looking for a husband, or you wouldn't be building a career with the intensity you clearly possess. Christina's eyes flashed with something between anger and hurt. You think because I need money, I'd sell myself? I think you're practical enough to recognize a mutually beneficial arrangement. Damien kept his voice level, professional. 90 days, long enough to neutralize Fairmont's campaign and demonstrate stability to the board. In exchange, $2 million. The sum hung between them like a physical presence. Christina's face went carefully blank. But Damien caught the slight widening of her eyes, the way her hand tightened on her tablet. $2 million for 90 days of pretending to be your wife. $2 million for helping me save my company and giving you the financial freedom to build your practice without compromise. Christina turned away, walking to his windows. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman wrestling with impossible choices. When she spoke, her voice was quiet. My mother has been fighting cancer for 2 years. The experimental treatments that might save her life aren't covered by insurance. I've been working 18-hour days trying to build my consulting practice enough to afford them. The admission hit Damien like a physical blow. He'd been right about her needing money, but wrong about the reason. This wasn't about career building. It was about life and death. The treatments cost how much? $800,000, plus ongoing care. Christina's reflection met his eyes in the glass. So yes, Mr. Heartland, I'm practical enough to recognize when I have no choice. She turned to face him, and Damien saw the exact moment she made her decision. Her spine straightened, her chin lifted, and the vulnerable woman disappeared behind a mask of business-like determination. What exactly would this arrangement entail? Damien felt a strange mixture of triumph and regret. A small wedding, enough public appearances to establish the relationship, and convincing performances for my family and the board. You'd live in my penthouse, attend business functions as my wife, and help me project the image of a settled family man. And after 90 days? A quiet divorce, irreconcilable differences. You keep the money and disappear from my life. Christina nodded slowly. I'd want everything in writing. The timeline, the expectations, the compensation. And I'd want my own lawyer to review the contract. Of course. And there would be no, she paused, her cheeks coloring slightly. No physical expectations. This would be purely professional. Damien found himself studying the way her pulse beat at the base of her throat, the way her lips parted slightly when she was nervous. The thought of 90 days living with this woman without touching her seemed like exquisite torture. Purely professional, he agreed. Then I accept. They shook hands again, and this time the electric contact felt like signing a pact with forces neither of them understood. Have you ever made a decision that changed everything you thought you knew about yourself? 1 week later, Damien stood at the altar of St. Matthew's Episcopal Church, watching Christina walk down the aisle in a simple ivory dress that somehow made her look more beautiful than any designer gown could have managed. 50 carefully selected witnesses, board members, family friends, key investors, watched with approval as Damien Hartland finally did what everyone had been demanding. Christina's smile was perfect as she joined him at the altar. To everyone watching, she looked like a woman in love. Only Damien could see the slight tremor in her hands, the way her eyes didn't quite meet his when she said, "I do." The kiss was supposed to be quick, perfunctory. But when Damien's lips touched Christina's, something ignited between them that had nothing to do with their carefully orchestrated contract. Her lips were soft, yielding, and for a moment, she kissed him back with a passion that made his head spin. When they broke apart, both were breathing harder than the moment warranted. Christina's eyes were wide with something that looked like shock, and Damien realized that their biggest challenge wouldn't be convincing others their marriage was real. It would be remembering that it wasn't. The reception at the Ritz-Carlton was a masterclass in controlled performance. Christina played her part flawlessly, accepting congratulations from board members and investors with the perfect blend of happiness and humility. Damien watched her charm his father's oldest friends, discussing everything from market volatility to vintage wines with equal expertise. "Your bride is quite impressive," said board member Harrison Wells, raising his champagne glass. "Where on earth did you find someone so perfect?" "Sometimes the best things find you when you're not looking," Damien replied smoothly, his hand finding the small of Christina's back. The innocent touch sent electricity through both of them, though neither acknowledged it. Christina leaned into him slightly, playing the part of the blissful newlywed. "Damien swept me off my feet with his passionate arguments about sustainable business practices," she said with a laugh that sounded completely genuine. "I couldn't resist a man who cares so deeply about building something meaningful." The lie was perfect. It painted Damien as principled and Christina as someone who valued substance over wealth. Harrison beamed with approval, already mentally composing his report to the other board members about Damien's excellent choice in wives. As the evening wore on, Damien found himself genuinely enjoying Christina's company. She was quick-witted, perceptive, and had an uncanny ability to read people that made her invaluable in these social situations. When elderly Mrs. Pemberton launched into a 20-minute monologue about her late husband's business philosophy, Christina listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions that delighted the lonely widow. "You're good at this," Damien murmured in her ear during a lull in conversations. "I like people," Christina replied simply. "Even when they're exhausting, most of them are interesting if you really listen." Her honesty surprised him. In his world, charity events and business dinners were endurance tests to be survived, not opportunities for genuine human connection. Watching Christina find something valuable in every interaction made him wonder what he'd been missing. The real test came 3 days later at the emergency board meeting Elizabeth Fairmont had called. She'd somehow learned about the wedding before the official announcement and was clearly trying to catch them off guard. "Congratulations on your recent nuptials," Elizabeth said with a smile that didn't reach her cold blue eyes. She was 42, striking rather than beautiful, with the kind of sharp intelligence that could cut glass. "Rather sudden, wasn't it?" "When you know, you know," Damien replied calmly, his arm around Christina's waist as they took their seats in the boardroom. "Indeed. And Miss Fletcher, forgive me, Mrs. Hartland, your financial consultant, I understand?" Christina's smile was warm but unshakable. "I specialize in corporate restructuring and family business dynamics. Actually, I've been following your acquisition strategy with great interest. It's quite innovative." The compliment was perfectly pitched, professional admiration without any hint of intimidation. Elizabeth's eyes narrowed slightly, recognizing a worthy opponent. "How fascinating that you met right when Damien needed expert advice about hostile takeovers." "Actually, we met 6 months ago at a charity auction," Christina lied smoothly. "I bid on a weekend at his family's vineyard and won. Damien personally gave me the tour, and we spent 3 hours talking about sustainable agriculture and family legacy. I knew then that he was nothing like his media reputation suggested." Damien stared at her in amazement. The lie was intricate, believable, and painted them both in exactly the light they needed. More importantly, it was delivered with such genuine warmth that even he almost believed it had happened. Elizabeth spent the next hour probing for weaknesses in their story, but Christina deflected every attack with gracious skill. By the time the meeting ended, the board members were looking at Damien with new respect, not just for his choice of wife, but for his apparent ability to inspire such loyalty and affection. "That was incredible," Damien said as they waited for the elevator after the meeting. "Where did you learn to handle pressure like that?" "Growing up with no money teaches you to think fast," Christina replied, but there was no bitterness in her voice. "And I've been defending my mother from insurance companies and doctors who think poor people don't deserve expensive treatments. Elizabeth Fairmont is nothing compared to a hospital administrator who's trying to deny coverage for life-saving medication." The elevator arrived, and they stepped inside alone. The confined space suddenly felt charged with tension as Damien processed what she'd revealed. This woman had been fighting battles he couldn't imagine while maintaining grace and dignity that impressed even his most cynical board members. "Christina," he started, but she held up a hand. "Don't. Whatever you're about to say, don't. We both know what this is." But as the elevator descended, Damien found himself studying her reflection in the polished doors. The way she worried her lower lip when she was thinking, the elegant line of her neck, the way her wedding ring caught the light. Their contract marriage was supposed to be simple, straightforward, professional. So why did being in this small space with her make his pulse race? The elevator jerked to a sudden stop between floors, and emergency lighting flickered on. Christina looked around with mild concern while Damien pressed the emergency button. "We're experiencing a minor mechanical issue," came the crackling voice through the intercom. "We'll have you moving again shortly." "Define shortly," Damien said. "Could be 20 minutes, could be an hour. Sorry for the inconvenience." Christina leaned against the wall, her professional composure intact despite their predicament. "Well, this gives us time to debrief today's performance." "You were perfect," Damien said honestly. "That story about the vineyard, how did you come up with that so quickly?" "You mentioned visiting your family vineyard in that magazine interview last year. The charity auction detail made it seem less calculated, more romantic." Christina's smile was self-deprecating. "I may have overthought our cover story during the past few sleepless nights." "Sleepless nights?" Her cheeks colored slightly. "This isn't exactly a normal situation. I wanted to be prepared." Damien moved closer, drawn by her vulnerability. "Are you having second thoughts? About the arrangement?" "No. The money will save my mother's life." Her voice grew quiet. "But I'd be lying if I said this was easy. Pretending to be something I'm not. Letting people believe." "Believe what?" Christina looked up at him, and in the intimate lighting of the stalled elevator, her eyes seemed to hold depths he'd never noticed. Believe that someone like you could actually love someone like me. The words hit him like a physical blow. Christina, I know what I am, Damien. I'm smart, I'm capable, but I'm also a poor girl from Oakland who's pretending to belong in your world. In 90 days, when this ends, you'll marry someone from your social class who can actually be the partner you deserve. Damien's hand reached out, without conscious thought, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. You think I don't see you? Really see you? Christina's breath caught at his touch, her eyes wide with surprise and something deeper. We have a contract. Forget the contract for a minute. His thumb brushed across her cheek. You're brilliant, Christina. You're beautiful. You're kind to lonely old women, and you fight insurance companies for your mother. And you've managed to charm my impossible father in 3 days. Any man would be lucky to have you. The space between them seemed to shrink, until Damien could count her individual eyelashes, could see the way her lips parted slightly, as she struggled with words that wouldn't come. Damien, she whispered, and his name on her lips sounded like a prayer. He was going to kiss her. Every rational thought screamed that it was a mistake, that it would complicate everything, that their arrangement depended on maintaining professional boundaries. But Christina Fletcher had somehow become the most fascinating woman he'd ever met. And the way she was looking at him suggested she was fighting the same impossible attraction. His hand cupped her face, his thumb stroking across her lower lip. Christina's eyes fluttered closed, and she leaned into his touch like a flower turning toward sunlight. This is dangerous, she breathed. I know. We agreed. I know. But neither of them pulled away. The elevator felt like its own private universe, suspended between floors, between their old lives, and whatever this moment might create. Damien's other hand found her waist, drawing her closer until they were breathing the same air. Christina's hands pressed against his chest, and he could feel the rapid beat of her heart through his shirt. What are we doing? She asked. I have no idea. The elevator lurched back to life with a mechanical grinding that broke the spell. They sprang apart just as the doors opened to reveal Linda Jefferson waiting with a concerned expression. Mr. Hartland. Are you both all right? Building maintenance said the elevator was stuck. We're fine, Damien managed, his voice rougher than intended. Christina smoothed her hair and straightened her jacket, but her hands were trembling slightly. Perfectly fine, Christina agreed, though her smile was shakier than her usual composed expression. As they walked through the lobby, Damien couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between them. The almost kiss in the elevator had been more intimate than their actual wedding kiss, charged with genuine desire rather than performance. That evening they attended the Pembrokes' anniversary dinner, another opportunity to be seen as a devoted couple. Christina wore a midnight blue dress that made her skin glow, and Damien found himself genuinely proud to have her on his arm rather than simply playing a part. You two are absolutely glowing, gushed Mrs. Pembroke. Marriage suits you both beautifully. We're still in the honeymoon phase, Christina replied with a laugh, her hand finding Damien's. Everything feels new and exciting. The casual touch sent warmth shooting up Damien's arm. Throughout dinner, he found himself hyper-aware of every contact, her fingers brushing his when she reached for her wine glass, her shoulder pressing against his when she leaned in to hear something over the conversation, the way she absently played with her wedding ring when she was thinking. After dinner, Marcus Sullivan approached their table. He was 45, recently divorced, and had been eyeing Christina all evening with obvious interest. Mrs. Hartland, he said, with a charming smile. Idy's hoping you might save me a dance. Damien felt a surge of something dark and possessive rise in his chest. The rational part of his mind recognized it as jealousy, which was ridiculous given their arrangement. But watching another man look at Christina with desire made Damien want to stake his claim in very primitive ways. I'd be delighted, Christina replied graciously, already standing. As Marcus led her to the small dance floor, Damien gripped his whiskey glass harder than necessary. Christina was a graceful dancer, following Marcus's lead effortlessly while maintaining the perfect distance for propriety. But when Marcus said something that made her laugh, genuinely laugh, not the polite social version, Damien felt his control snap. He was crossing the dance floor before he consciously decided to move. Mind if I cut in? He asked Marcus, his voice carrying just enough edge to make it clear this wasn't really a request. Of course not, Marcus replied, though his disappointed expression suggested otherwise. Your wife is a lovely dancer. She's lovely at everything, Damien said, pulling Christina into his arms with perhaps more possessiveness than their fake marriage warranted. As they swayed to the soft jazz music, Christina looked up at him with questioning eyes. That was a bit territorial. I don't like other men touching what's mine. The words escaped before he could censor them, and Christina's eyes widened with surprise. I'm not actually yours, Damien. This is pretend, remember? But even as she said it, her body was responding to his proximity, her breathing growing shallow as his hand pressed against the small of her back. The silk of her dress felt warm under his palm, and he could smell her perfume, something subtle and floral that made him want to bury his face in her neck. Right now, it doesn't feel pretend, he admitted quietly. Christina's lips parted as if to argue, but no words came. The music swirled around them, and other couples faded into irrelevance. This was dangerous territory, exactly what they'd agreed to avoid, but neither seemed capable of stepping back. We're playing with fire, Christina whispered. I know. Our contract specifically states, forget the contract. His hand tightened on hers, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. Christina's wedding ring caught the light, reminding them both of the elaborate fiction they were living. But the way she was looking at him had nothing to do with contracts or business arrangements. What happens when this gets complicated? She asked. Maybe it already is. The song ended, but they remained frozen in each other's arms for several heartbeats longer than appropriate. Finally, Christina stepped back, her professional mask sliding into place. We should go home, she said carefully. It's been a long day. But as they said their goodbyes and collected their coats, Damien caught Christina watching him, with an expression that suggested she was fighting the same internal war he was. Their 90-day arrangement had seemed straightforward when it was just numbers on a contract. Living with Christina Fletcher was proving far more complicated than either of them had anticipated. Living together in Damien's penthouse proved to be an exercise in exquisite torture. Christina had taken the guest suite, maintaining the professional boundaries they'd agreed upon, but sharing morning coffee and evening meals created an intimacy that had nothing to do with their contract. Damien found himself looking forward to these quiet moments more than any business meeting or social event. Christina was different when she thought no one was watching, softer, more vulnerable. She'd curl up on his leather sofa with financial reports, unconsciously tucking her feet under her like a contented cat. She hummed while cooking breakfast, creating elaborate omelets that put his usual protein bars to shame. You don't have to cook for me, he said one morning, watching her flip eggs with practiced ease. I like cooking. It relaxes me. Christina glanced over her shoulder with a smile. Besides, someone needs to make sure you eat actual food instead of surviving on caffeine and stubbornness. The domestic comment was so natural, so wife-like, that it caught them both off guard. Christina turned back to the stove quickly, but Damien caught the flush creeping up her neck. 2 weeks into their arrangement, Christina accompanied him to the monthly board meeting, where Elizabeth Fairmont made her latest move. I've been reviewing Heartland Industries' charitable giving, Elizabeth announced, her voice carrying across the conference room like ice. For a family company that claims to value community involvement, your contributions are surprisingly minimal. The criticism hit its mark. Several board members shifted uncomfortably, and Damien felt his jaw tighten. His grandfather had been legendary for his philanthropy, but Damien had focused more on efficient business practices than public generosity. Perhaps Mrs. Heartland has some insights, Elizabeth continued with false sweetness. Given her background in financial consulting, I'm sure she has opinions about optimizing charitable expenditures. It was a trap. Elizabeth clearly expected Christina to either fumble the answer or reveal that she was merely decorative rather than substantive. But Christina rose to the challenge with calm confidence. Actually, I've been working with Damien on a comprehensive community investment strategy, she said smoothly. We're looking at initiatives that create sustainable impact rather than simple tax write-offs. Education programs, small business microloans, job training partnerships with local colleges. Damien stared at her in amazement. They'd never discussed any such strategy, but Christina was outlining a plan that was both brilliant and completely aligned with his grandfather's values. The goal isn't just to give money away, Christina continued, but to create programs that strengthen communities while developing future talent pipelines for companies like Heartland Industries. It's strategic philanthropy that honors the company's heritage while building for the future. Board member Harrison Wells leaned forward with interest. That sounds remarkably similar to your grandfather's approach, Damien. Community partnership rather than simple charity. Christina has helped me understand that true leadership means investing in people, not just profits, Damien said, playing along seamlessly. We want Heartland Industries to be known for creating opportunities, not just returns. Elizabeth's smile grew strained as other board members began asking enthusiastic questions about implementation timelines and budget allocations. What had been intended as an attack had transformed into a demonstration of exactly the kind of forward-thinking leadership they'd been hoping to see from Damien. After the meeting, as they waited for the elevator, Christina looked exhausted. That was incredible improvisation, Damien said quietly. Where did all that come from? I actually believe it, Christina replied. Your grandfather's legacy is about more than stock prices. You could honor that while still building something modern and innovative. We could. Christina caught her slip, her cheeks coloring. You could. This is your company, your family legacy. But the damage was done. For a moment she'd spoken as if they were true partners, as if her 90-day contract included genuinely caring about his family's future. The realization hung between them as the elevator arrived, the same elevator where they'd almost kissed 2 weeks earlier. This time, they rode in careful silence, both acutely aware of the small space and the memory of what had almost happened. That evening, Damien found Christina on his terrace, staring out at the city lights with a wineglass in her hand. She'd changed from her business attire into soft jeans and a cream sweater that made her look younger, more approachable. Penny for your thoughts, he said, settling into the chair beside her. I called my mother today. The doctors want to start the next round of treatments soon. Christina's voice was quiet, reflective. She asked about my new husband, wanted to know if I was happy. What did you tell her? The truth. That you're nothing like I expected. Christina turned to look at him, her eyes serious in the soft lighting. She's worried about me, you know. Thinks I'm getting too attached to something that isn't real. Damien felt his chest tighten. Is she right? Christina was quiet for so long, he thought she might not answer. Finally, she spoke without looking at him. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd met differently? If there was no hostile takeover, no contract, no time limit? The question hit him like a physical blow, because he'd been wondering exactly that. Christina, I know it's pointless. We're from different worlds. We want different things. But sometimes, when you look at me like you did during the board meeting today, or when we're cooking breakfast together, I forget that this is temporary. Damien reached for her hand before he could stop himself. What if it doesn't have to be? The words surprised them both. Christina's eyes widened, and she pulled her hand away as if his touch burned. Don't say things like that. Why not? Because in 67 days, I'm going to disappear from your life, and you're going to marry someone appropriate. Someone from your world who can actually be the partner you need. What if I don't want someone appropriate? Christina stood abruptly, wrapping her arms around herself. This is exactly what we agreed wouldn't happen. We're supposed to be keeping this professional. Professionals stopped working the moment you improvised that entire philanthropy strategy to defend my family's reputation. I was protecting our arrangement. You were protecting me. Damien stood, moving closer, just like you protected me from Elizabeth's attacks, just like you charmed my father and made the board members remember why they loved my grandfather. You care about this company, about my family, about me. Of course I care. The words exploded from Christina with more emotion than she'd intended. But caring doesn't change anything. In 2 months, you'll have fought off Elizabeth's takeover. The board will see you as settled and responsible, and you won't need me anymore. What if I need you for reasons that have nothing to do with business? The question hung between them, like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Christina's eyes were bright with unshed tears, and Damien realized this conversation was costing her as much as it was him. "Don't make this harder than it already is," she whispered. Before he could respond, his phone rang. Robert Hartland's name flashed on the screen, and Damien almost ignored it. But calls from his father at 9 p.m. usually meant emergencies. "Yes? Damien, I need you and Christina at the Hamptons house this weekend. The Pemberton family is celebrating their 50th anniversary, and they've specifically requested your presence. It's important for board relations." Damien looked at Christina, who'd obviously heard enough to understand. "We'll be there." "Good. And Damien, bring your A game. Thomas Pemberton still owns 8% of the company through his trust fund. Elizabeth has been courting his favor." The call ended, leaving them both staring at each other with the weight of what had almost been said hanging in the air. "A weekend in the Hamptons," Damien said finally. "Separate bedrooms," Christina replied quickly. "Of course," but they both knew that being alone together for an entire weekend, away from the safety of their established routines, was going to test every boundary they'd established. Friday afternoon, they drove to the Hartland family estate in the Hamptons, a sprawling Georgian mansion that had been in the family for 3 generations. Christina was quiet during the drive, staring out at the rolling countryside with an expression Damien couldn't read. "Having second thoughts?" he asked. "Just tired. It's been a long week." But when they arrived at the house, Christina's professional mask slipped back into place. She charmed the estate staff, admired the gardens, and played the role of the devoted new wife with flawless precision. The Pemberton anniversary celebration was held at the country club, and Christina once again proved invaluable in navigating the complex social dynamics. She remembered everyone's names, asked about their children, and somehow made each conversation feel meaningful rather than obligatory. "Your wife is a treasure," Thomas Pemberton told Damien, as they watched Christina discuss art with his daughter. "Where on earth did you find someone so perfect?" "She found me," Damien replied, and realized it was more true than he'd intended. That evening, they returned to the estate as storm clouds gathered on the horizon. The forecast called for severe weather, the kind of late spring thunderstorm that could knock out power and flood roads. "I should check that we have emergency supplies," Christina said, already moving toward the kitchen with the efficiency of someone accustomed to planning for contingencies. Damien watched her inventory flashlights and bottled water, marveling at how she'd somehow made his family estate feel more like home in one day than it had in years. The house had always been a symbol of family obligation and legacy pressure. With Christina moving through its rooms, it felt warm and lived in. The storm hit around 10 p.m. with the fury of nature unleashed. Thunder shook the windows, and lightning illuminated the grounds in stark, dramatic flashes. Christina curled up in the library with a book, seemingly unbothered by the violent weather, while Damien tried to focus on business emails. "Aren't you afraid of storms?" he asked during a particularly dramatic thunder crash. "I love them. All that power, all that energy, it's like nature reminding us how small we really are." Christina smiled from her position on the leather sofa. "My mother and I used to sit on our apartment fire escape during thunderstorms when I was little. She said storms washed the world clean, gave everything a fresh start. The power went out with the next lightning strike, plunging them into darkness." Damien found the flashlights Christina had prepared, but the warm pool of light seemed to make the space more intimate rather than less threatening. "We should probably go to bed," Christina said, though she made no move to leave the cozy circle of light. "Probably." But neither of them moved. The storm raged outside, and the isolation of the estate made it feel like they were the only 2 people in the world. In the flickering candlelight Damien had lit, Christina looked ethereal, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or designer clothes. "Christina," he said softly. She looked up from her book, and in her eyes he saw the same longing he'd been fighting for weeks, the same impossible attraction that their contract couldn't contain. "We shouldn't," she whispered. "I know. This will change everything. Everything's already changed." Thunder crashed overhead as Damien moved to sit beside her on the sofa. Christina's book slipped from her hands as he cupped her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheek in the golden candlelight. "Tell me to stop," he said. Instead, Christina's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. "I can't." When their lips met, it was nothing like their careful, performative wedding kiss. This was hunger and need and weeks of suppressed longing, finally unleashed. Christina melted against him with a soft sound of surrender that made his heart race. He kissed her deeply, thoroughly, pouring weeks of wanting into the connection between them. Christina responded with equal passion, her hands tangling in his hair as she pressed closer. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Your room or mine?" Damien asked against her lips. Christina's answer was to take his hand and lead him upstairs, toward a night that would change everything between them forever. Christina led him to the master bedroom, where rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows and candles cast dancing shadows across the walls. The storm outside seemed to mirror the tempest of emotions neither could contain any longer. "Are you sure?" Damien asked, his hands framing her face as lightning illuminated her features. "I've been sure since that elevator," Christina admitted, her voice barely audible above the thunder. "I've been fighting it, but I can't pretend anymore." Damien's response was to kiss her again, deeper this time, with all the passion they'd been denying for weeks. Christina's hands worked at the buttons of his shirt, while his fingers traced the delicate line of her neck. Both of them desperate to eliminate every barrier between them. "We're breaking all our rules," Christina whispered as his lips found the sensitive spot below her ear. "Then let's break them completely." What followed was a surrender so complete it left them both trembling. By candlelight and storm glow, they discovered each other with reverent touches and whispered confessions. Every caress spoke of weeks of longing. Every kiss deepened their connection beyond anything a contract could define. Damien had been with beautiful women before, but nothing had prepared him for the way Christina responded to his touch, as if she'd been waiting her entire life for exactly this moment, exactly him. Her skin was silk beneath his hands, her sighs like music that drowned out the thunder. "You're so beautiful," he murmured against her collarbone, and Christina's answering smile was radiant in the flickering light. "Don't stop," she breathed, arching into his touch. "Please don't stop." Time seemed suspended as they explored this new territory together. The professional boundaries they'd so carefully maintained crumbled completely, replaced by an intimacy that felt both inevitable and miraculous. When they finally came together, it was with a passion that left them both gasping, clinging to each other as if the storm might tear them apart. Afterward, they lay entwined in the massive bed, listening to the rain gentle into a steady rhythm against the windows. Christina's head rested on Damien's chest, her fingers tracing lazy patterns across his skin. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Damien's arms tightened around her. "I don't know. But I know I don't want this to end in 52 days. Christina lifted her head to look at him, her eyes serious in the soft candlelight. "Our contract." "Forget the contract. What do you want, Christina? Not what's practical or professional or safe. What do you actually want?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Christina was quiet for so long that Damien thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I want you. Not just for 52 more days. I want to wake up next to you and fight with you about business strategies and watch you charm your father into actually smiling. I want to build something real with you." Relief flooded through Damien so intensely, it was almost painful. "Then stay. Not because of the contract, not because of the money. Stay because you want to." "It's not that simple." "Why not?" Christina sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. Even in the dim light, Damien could see the conflict warring in her expression. "Because in 52 days, you'll remember who you are and who I am. You'll remember that I'm the woman you paid to pretend to be your wife. And you'll wonder if any of this was real or if I was just playing a very convincing part." The words hit him like cold water. Do you really think I'm that shallow? I think you're that practical. I think when Elizabeth's threat is over and the board stops questioning your judgment, you'll realize you could have any woman in the world. Someone with family connections, someone who belongs in your social circle, someone who— Damien silenced her with a kiss that was fierce and possessive. Stop. Just stop. I don't want any woman in the world. I want you. The woman who defended my company like it was her own, who makes my father laugh, who remembers the names of lonely widows and fights insurance companies for her mother. But what if we take this one day at a time? Damien's hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. What if we stop overthinking and just see where this goes? Christina searched his face as if looking for lies or false promises. Whatever she found there seemed to satisfy her, because she leaned into his touch with a soft smile. One day at a time, she agreed. They made love again as dawn broke over the Hamptons, slower this time, savoring each touch and whispered endearment. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside washed clean and sparkling, with raindrops that caught the early morning light. The drive back to the city Sunday evening was filled with comfortable conversation and the kind of easy intimacy that came from crossing an irrevocable line. Christina had her hand on Damien's thigh as he drove, and every casual touch sent warmth spreading through his chest. We'll need to be careful around the office, she said as they approached Manhattan. Linda has eyes like a hawk, and if the board suspects our marriage has become complicated, it could undermine everything we've built. You're right. Damien covered her hand with his. In public, we maintain professional boundaries. In private, we figure out what this is. But maintaining professional boundaries proved more difficult than either had anticipated. The next morning, Damien found himself fighting the urge to kiss Christina goodbye as she left for a client meeting. The casual intimacy they'd shared at the estate felt impossible to replicate in his sterile penthouse. Christina seemed to be struggling with the same adjustment. She was more formal at breakfast, more careful about casual touches, as if she was rebuilding the walls they'd torn down during the storm. Are you having regrets? Damien asked as they waited for their respective cars in the lobby. No regrets, just confusion about how to navigate this. Christina's smile was uncertain. We spent weeks establishing boundaries, and now we're rewriting all the rules. Maybe we don't need rules. Everyone needs rules, Damien, especially when the stakes are this high. She was right, of course. But watching her maintain careful distance when all he wanted was to pull her close felt like torture. The weekend had changed everything between them, but their public lives demanded they pretend nothing had happened. The test came 3 days later when Marcus Sullivan approached Christina at a charity luncheon. Damien watched from across the room as the divorced businessman monopolized her attention, his intentions obvious in every gesture and smile. Your wife is quite popular. Elizabeth Fairmont appeared at Damien's elbow, like a predator scenting weakness. Marcus have been pursuing her rather aggressively. Christina can handle herself, Damien replied evenly, though his hands clenched at his sides as Marcus leaned closer to whisper something in Christina's ear. Of course, though one wonders if a marriage of such recent convenience can withstand that kind of temptation. Elizabeth's words were poison wrapped in silk, designed to plant seeds of doubt. But watching Christina's polite but distant response to Marcus's attention, Damien felt only pride. She was handling the situation with perfect grace, neither encouraging nor rudely rejecting the man's obvious interest. When Marcus placed his hand on Christina's lower back, however, Damien's control snapped. He was across the room in seconds, his arm sliding possessively around his wife's waist. Sullivan, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, I hope you're not monopolizing my beautiful wife's entire afternoon. Just enjoying her company, Marcus replied, though he stepped back slightly. You're a lucky man, Heartland. I'm reminded of that every day. The response was automatic, the kind of thing any devoted husband would say. But as Christina looked up at him with surprise and something that might have been gratitude, Damien realized he meant every word. Later that evening, as they shared dinner in the penthouse, Christina was unusually quiet. Something young? Damien asked. Marcus asked me to dinner tomorrow night. Without you. Damien's fork stilled halfway to his mouth. And? I told him I was flattered but unavailable. Christina's smile was wry. He seemed to think our marriage was more flexible than I was comfortable with. Did he say why he thought that? Someone's been telling people that we have an arrangement rather than a romance, that our marriage is more business partnership than love match. Damien felt ice form in his stomach. Elizabeth. Probably. The question is, how do we counter that narrative without, Christina gestured vaguely between them, without making this more complicated than it already is? What if we stop fighting it? Fighting what? This. Us. What if we stop pretending it's complicated and just admit that we're in love? The words hung in the air like a confession and a challenge combined. Christina's eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked as vulnerable as she had during the thunderstorm. Are we? She asked quietly. In love? Damien reached across the table, taking her hand in his. I am. Completely, impossibly, professionally inappropriate in love with my contract wife. Christina's smile started slowly, spreading across her face like sunrise. Well, that is a problem. The biggest problem I've ever had. What are we going to do about it? First, we're going to extend your contract indefinitely. Damien's thumb stroked across her knuckles. Second, we're going to make Elizabeth Fairmont's life very difficult. And third, we're going to figure out how to turn the best fake marriage in corporate history into something real. Christina laughed, the sound bright and genuine. You make it sound so simple. Maybe it is. Maybe we've been overthinking this entire situation. Or maybe, Christina said, standing and moving around the table to settle in his lap, we've been thinking about it exactly the right amount. When she kissed him, slow and sweet and full of promise, Damien realized that their 90-day contract had become the least important document in his life. What would you do if you fell in love with someone who might be pretending? But as Christina deepened the kiss, her fingers tangling in his hair, Damien knew with absolute certainty that nothing about her feelings was pretense. The woman in his arms was real, their connection was real, and somehow their fake marriage had become the most authentic relationship of his life. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like coming home. For 2 weeks, they lived in a bubble of careful happiness. Their public appearances became more natural as genuine affection replaced performed chemistry. Christina's laugh came easier, Damien's smiles reached his eyes, and even the most cynical board members began commenting on how settled and content he seemed. But Elizabeth Fairmont was watching, waiting, gathering ammunition for an attack they didn't see coming. It started with a phone call to Christina's office on a Tuesday morning. Mrs. Hartland? This is James Mitchell from the Financial Tribune. I'm working on a feature about power couples in corporate America, and I'd love to interview you about your marriage to Damien Hartland. Christina's blood chilled. I'm flattered, but I prefer to keep my private life private. Of course I understand, though I should mention, we've received some interesting information about the circumstances surrounding your wedding. Information that suggests your marriage might be more of a business arrangement than a love story. The threat was barely veiled. Christina kept her voice steady through sheer willpower. I'm not sure what you think you know, Mr. Mitchell, but I can assure you that my husband and I are very much in love. I'm sure you are, but the public has a right to know when corporate leaders are potentially misleading them about their personal lives. The story runs tomorrow unless you'd like to provide your perspective. The call ended, leaving Christina staring at her phone with hands that trembled slightly. She immediately called Damien, but he was in meetings all afternoon. By the time she reached him that evening, panic had crystallized into grim determination. We need to talk, she said the moment he walked through the penthouse door. One look at her face told him everything. What happened? Christina explained the phone call, watching Damien's expression grow darker with each detail. When she finished, he was pacing like a caged predator. Elizabeth's behind this. She's been digging, looking for any crack in our foundation. The question is, how much does she actually know? Christina rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building. If she has documentation about our contract. She doesn't. Everything was handled through Carrie, and those files are privileged. But she might have enough circumstantial evidence to make people ask questions. Questions we can't answer without lying more than we already have. Damien stopped pacing, his eyes finding hers across the room. What are you thinking? I'm thinking maybe it's time for me to disappear. The words hit him like a physical blow. No, absolutely not. Damien, be realistic. If this story breaks, it destroys everything you've worked for. The board will lose confidence, Elizabeth will get her opening for the takeover, and your family's company will be gone. I don't care about the company if losing it means losing you. Christina's heart clenched at the fierce conviction in his voice, but she forced herself to remain practical. Yes, you do. Heartland Industries is your grandfather's legacy, your father's life work. I won't be responsible for destroying that. You're not destroying anything. Elizabeth is. But I'm the weapon she's using. Christina moved closer, her hands finding his chest. If I leave now, quietly, the story becomes irrelevant. Mysterious wife disappears, people will assume we had problems. Maybe that I couldn't handle the pressure of your world. It protects you and the company. And what about us? What about what we've built? What we've built was always temporary. The lie nearly choked her, but Christina forced herself to say it. The contract was for 90 days. We just got carried away. Damien's hands gripped her shoulders, his eyes searching her face desperately. You don't mean that. Of course I mean it. I'm a financial consultant from Oakland, and you're a billionaire CEO. We were always playing with fire. Stop lying to me. His voice was raw with pain and anger. Stop lying to yourself. What we have is real, Christina. You know it's real. Real doesn't matter when the whole world is about to find out we started as a business transaction. Then we'll weather the storm together. There won't be anything left to weather. Your company, your reputation, your family's legacy, all of it will be gone. Christina pulled away from his touch before her resolve could crumble. I won't let that happen. So you're just going to run? Disappear like none of this mattered? I'm going to do what I was hired to do. Protect your interests. The clinical language was like a knife between them. Damien flinched as if she'd slapped him, his face going carefully blank. Is that what this has been to you? Protecting your employer's interests? Don't. Don't what? Don't ask if the woman I love has been playing an elaborate con game? Don't make this harder than it already is. It's only hard because you're making it hard. Damien's control finally snapped. Elizabeth Fairmont is a predator who destroys everything she touches, and you're handing her exactly what she wants. You're destroying us to save a company that means nothing without you in it. The company means everything to your father, to the employees who depend on it, to the families whose retirement funds are invested in it. I'm nobody, Damien, just a woman you hired to play a part. If you were nobody, Elizabeth wouldn't be targeting you. Damien's voice went quiet, deadly. She's afraid of you, Christina. Afraid of how real you've made this, how much you've changed me. She knows that everything good about my leadership, everything the board respects about the man I've become, comes from you. That's not true. It's completely true. The philanthropy initiatives, the way I handle family business politics, even my relationship with my father. You've made me better at all of it. Elizabeth sees that, and she's trying to eliminate her biggest threat. Christina felt tears threatening and turned away before he could see them. None of that matters if it all comes crashing down because of a scandal. What matters is that I love you. What matters is that you love me too, even if you're too scared to admit it right now. Love doesn't pay for cancer treatments or save companies from hostile takeovers. The hell with the cancer treatments. I'll pay for your mother's care whether you stay or go. And the hell with the company if keeping it means losing you. The casual mention of her mother's medical bills stung like salt in a wound. I don't want your charity. It's not charity. It's what people do for the people they love. People like me don't get fairy tale endings with people like you. Says who? Damien moved behind her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Who decided that a brilliant, beautiful, compassionate woman doesn't deserve happiness because she didn't grow up with trust funds and country club memberships? The world decided that. Reality decided that. Reality is that I can't imagine my life without you in it. Reality is that you've become the most important thing in my world. Reality is that I'd rather lose everything than lose you. Christina leaned back against him to spite herself, allowing herself one moment of weakness. What if we try to fight this and lose everything anyway? What if the scandal destroys us both? Then at least we go down together. For a heartbeat, she almost gave in. Almost let herself believe that love could conquer board meetings and media scandals and the vast differences in their backgrounds. But then her phone rang, and James Mitchell's name flashed on the screen. "I have to take this," she said, stepping away from Damien's embrace. "Mrs. Hartland," came the journalist's smooth voice. "I wanted to give you one final opportunity to comment before we go to print. I told you I have nothing to say, not even about the $2 million payment your consulting firm received from Heartland Industries 3 days before your wedding. That seems like quite a coincidence." Christina's knees nearly buckled. Somehow he found the financial trail. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I'm talking about a contract marriage, Mrs. Hartland. I'm talking about a business arrangement disguised as a love story. The public deserves to know when they're being deceived." The call ended, and Christina stared at her phone with growing horror. Damien was watching her with eyes that saw too much. "He knows," she whispered. "How much?" "Enough." Christina sank onto the sofa, feeling the weight of inevitability settling over her. He found the payment trail. "We'll deny it, say the consulting fee was unrelated." "Damien, it's over. Even if we convince people the marriage is real now, the fact that it started as a business transaction will destroy your credibility. The board will never trust you again. So what do you want to do?" Christina looked up at him, this brilliant, complicated, generous man who'd somehow become her entire world in 3 months, and felt her heart break cleanly in two. "I want to pack my things and disappear before the story breaks. I want you to express shock and hurt that your wife would leave you without explanation. I want you to play the role of the betrayed husband so convincingly that people feel sorry for you instead of suspicious. Christina, and I want you to find a real wife as soon as the scandal dies down, someone who can actually be the partner you deserve." Damien stared at her as if she'd spoken in a foreign language. "You think I could just replace you? Find some interchangeable socialite and forget that you exist? I think you're stronger than you know. I think you'll build an amazing life and an incredible legacy. And someday you'll thank me for not letting one scheming woman destroy everything you've worked for. You're not the scheming woman in this scenario, aren't I? I took your money in exchange for playing a part. I seduced you into thinking it was real. I'm exactly what Elizabeth says I am. You're the woman I love." Damien's voice broke on the words. "You're the woman who makes me want to be better than I am. You're the woman who turned a fake marriage into the most real thing in my life." Christina stood on shaking legs, knowing she had to leave before her resolve crumbled completely. "Pack me a bag. Something small, practical. I'll stay at Nicole's tonight and fly out in the morning." "Where will you go?" "Somewhere far enough away that the media won't find me. Somewhere I can disappear until this all blows over." "And after it blows over?" The question was barely a whisper, full of hope and desperation. Christina met his eyes for one last time, memorizing the way he looked at her as if she was something precious and irreplaceable. "After it blows over, you'll remember that this was always supposed to be temporary." She walked toward the bedroom before he could argue, before the tears threatening to fall could betray her. Behind her, she heard Damien sink onto the sofa with a sound that might have been a sob. An hour later, Christina stood in the penthouse lobby with a single suitcase, waiting for the car that would take her away from the only home that had ever felt real. Damien handed her an envelope, with fingers that shook slightly. "Your final payment," he said formally, "plus enough to cover your mother's treatments for the next 2 years. I don't want a gift. It's what you earned." His voice was carefully controlled, but his eyes were devastated. "You did exactly what I hired you to do. You saved my company. Promise me something." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, close enough to touch. "Promise me that if you ever decide you want a real marriage, instead of running from one, you'll call me first." The request nearly destroyed her. Christina nodded because speaking would have meant sobbing, and she'd hurt him enough already. The car arrived, and Damien carried her suitcase down personally. As the vehicle pulled away from the curb, Christina looked back to see him standing alone under the building's lights, hands in his pockets, watching her disappear into the night. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done. It was also, she told herself firmly, the right thing, even if it felt like dying. The story broke the next morning with all the subtlety of a nuclear explosion. Billionaire's fake wife. The $2 million marriage contract that fooled Wall Street. Damien stared at the headline on his phone screen, sitting alone in his penthouse that still smelled like Christina's perfume. The article was everything he'd expected, a blend of documented facts and malicious speculation that painted him as a manipulative fraud and Christina as a gold-digging opportunist. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since 6 a.m. Reporters, board members, business associates, social contacts. Everyone wanted a statement, an explanation, a piece of the scandal that was already trending on financial news networks. Linda knocked on his door at 9 a.m., her expression carefully neutral. "Sir, the board has called an emergency meeting for this afternoon. Mr. Fairmont has requested that Elizabeth be allowed to present her proposal for company restructuring." "Of course she has." Damien's voice was hollow. "And my father?" "Mr. Hartland is upset. He's asked to speak with you privately before the board meeting." Damien nodded, already knowing that conversation would be one of the worst of his life. Robert Hartland had built his reputation on integrity and family values. Having his son exposed as someone who'd staged an elaborate romantic fraud would be devastating. The meeting with his father took place in Robert's home office, surrounded by photographs of 3 generations of Hartland men who'd never had to purchase wives to maintain corporate credibility. "Explain," Robert said without preamble, his face carved from stone. "I needed to appear settled, to counteract Elizabeth's narrative about my character. Christina Fletcher was a business consultant who needed money for her mother's medical treatments. We made a mutually beneficial arrangement. A fake marriage. Yes. For $2 million. Yes." Robert was quiet for a long moment, staring out his window at the gardens his wife had planted 30 years ago. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with disappointment. "Your grandfather built this company on trust, Damien. Trust from investors, from employees, from the community. Today, thanks to your deception, that trust is shattered. I was trying to save the company. You were trying to save your pride." Robert's eyes were cold when they met his son's. "You couldn't stand the idea that Elizabeth Fairmont might outsmart you, so you hired an actress to play the role of the perfect wife." "Christina isn't an actress. She's brilliant, honest. She's a woman who took $2 million to lie to my friends and business associates for 3 months. She's a woman who saved her mother's life and helped me become a better leader." "A better leader?" Robert's laugh was bitter. "Son, by tonight you may not be a leader at all. The board is needing to discuss your removal as CEO." The words hit like physical blows, but Damien found he didn't care as much as he should have. All he could think about was Christina. Alone somewhere, probably reading the same vicious headlines that portrayed her as a scheming gold digger. "Where is she?" Robert asked. "I don't know." "You don't know where your fake wife went?" "I don't know where the woman I love went," Damien corrected quietly. "Christina left to protect the company. She sacrificed her own happiness to try to save mine. And yet the company may be lost anyway. Then I'll find another company, but I'll never find another Christina." Robert studied his son with something that might have been surprise. "You really believe you love her?" "I know I love her." "Even though your relationship began as a business transaction?" "Especially because it began as a business transaction. I got to see who Christina really is when she thought love wasn't possible. When she was just being herself instead of trying to impress me. She's the most genuine person I've ever met. Genuine people don't typically accept money to fake marriages. Desperate people do." Christina was facing the choice between her pride and her mother's life. She chose her mother, which tells me everything I need to know about her character. The board meeting that afternoon was a bloodbath. Elizabeth Fairmont arrived with a detailed presentation about company restructuring and a motion to remove Damien as CEO. The vote was scheduled for the following week, giving board members time to consider the full implications of recent revelations. The question, Elizabeth said with barely concealed satisfaction, is whether Heartland Industries can afford to be led by someone whose judgment is so fundamentally compromised. If Damien Heartland will deceive the public about something as basic as his marriage, what else might he be hiding? Damien defended himself as best he could, but the damage was extensive. Several board members who'd been supportive just days earlier now looked at him with disappointment and suspicion. The fake marriage scandal had undermined everything he'd built over the past 3 months. After the meeting, Harrison Wells pulled him aside. "I'm sorry, Damien. I genuinely liked your wife, Christina. She seemed so authentic, so genuinely caring about the company and your family." She was authentic. Her feelings for the company, for my family, for me, all of that was real. But the marriage wasn't. The marriage became real. That's what Elizabeth doesn't understand. You can't fake the kind of connection Christina and I developed. Harrison looked skeptical. If that's true, why did she run? Why didn't she stay to fight for your relationship? The question haunted Damien for the rest of the week. As the media frenzy continued and his support on the board eroded, he found himself wondering the same thing. If Christina really loved him, why had she disappeared without a trace? He hired private investigators, but they found nothing. Christina Fletcher seemed to have vanished, as completely as if she'd never existed. Her consulting business was closed, her apartment abandoned, her phone disconnected. Even Nicole, her best friend, claimed not to know where she'd gone. "She made me promise not to tell you," Nicole admitted when Damien cornered her at a coffee shop near her office. "She said it was for your own good." My own good? Losing the woman I love is for my own good? She thinks if you can't find her, you'll move on. Build a life with someone more suitable. There is no one more suitable. There's only Christina. Nicole studied him with the protective instincts of a best friend evaluating a potential threat. "She really got to you, didn't she? She changed my life. Even though it started as a business deal, especially because it started as a business deal. I got to fall in love with her gradually, naturally, without any of the games or expectations that come with traditional dating in my social circle. And if you found her, what would you do?" "I'd convince her that what we have is worth fighting for." Nicole was quiet for a moment, clearly wrestling with conflicting loyalties. Finally, she sighed. "I can't tell you where she is. But I can tell you she's safe, she's taking care of her mother, and she's miserable without you." "She's miserable?" "Devastated. She checks the financial news obsessively, reads every article about the company. She's convinced she destroyed your life. She saved my life." "Then maybe you should tell her that." But how could he tell her anything when she disappeared completely? Damien threw himself into damage control, working 18-hour days to save his position and the company. He gave interviews defending his marriage as a genuine love story that had unfortunately become complicated by business circumstances. He emphasized Christina's qualifications and contributions, portraying her as a brilliant consultant who'd become much more than an employee. The strategy worked with some audiences but not others. The board remained skeptical, and Elizabeth continued pressing her advantage. 3 weeks after Christina's departure, the vote of no confidence was scheduled for the following Monday. That Friday evening, Damien sat in his empty penthouse, staring at the wedding photo they'd taken for the announcement. Christina looked radiant in the image, her smile genuine despite the artificial circumstances. He'd been looking at the camera, but she'd been looking at him, with an expression that should have told him everything he needed to know about her feelings. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at Central Park, Sheep Meadow, tomorrow at noon. Come alone. See." Damien stared at the message for a full minute, his heart pounding so hard he could barely breathe. Christina was back. After 3 weeks of silence, she was finally ready to talk. He arrived at the meadow 30 minutes early, pacing like a madman among the Saturday afternoon picnickers and dog walkers. When he finally saw her walking across the grass, his breath caught in his throat. Christina looked thinner, more fragile than when she'd left. Her clothes were simpler, jeans and a sweater instead of designer business attire, but she was still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. When their eyes met across the open space, she stopped walking, as if seeing him had stolen her courage. Damien closed the distance between them slowly, afraid that moving too quickly might spook her into running again. "Hi," he said, when they were finally face to face. "Hi." Her voice was soft, uncertain. "You look tired." "I haven't been sleeping well. Turns out my bed is too big for one person." A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. "How's the company?" "Surviving. Barely. The board votes on my future Monday morning." "I know. I've been following the coverage." Christina wrapped her arms around herself. "I'm sorry. I thought leaving would make the scandal die down faster. It might have, if I'd played the heartbroken husband better. But I couldn't bring myself to trash you to save my reputation." "You should have. It would have been smart politics." "I don't want to be smart about you, Christina. I want to be honest." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of 3 weeks of separation and unspoken words hanging between them. "Why did you want to see me?" Damien asked finally. Christina took a shaky breath, her hands twisting nervously. "Because I have something to tell you. Something that changes everything." "What is it?" She looked up at him with eyes that held fear and hope in equal measure. "I'm pregnant." The words hit him like lightning, illuminating everything in stark, brilliant clarity. "Pregnant. 8 weeks. I found out last week." Christina's voice was barely a whisper. "I thought you deserved to know, even though I know this complicates everything even more." Damien felt joy surge through him so powerfully, it nearly brought him to his knees. "Christina, I'm not telling you because I want something from you," she continued quickly. "I have money saved and my mother is stable now. I can raise the baby on my own. I thought you should know you're going to be a father." "Are you planning to raise our child alone?" "I thought that would be best, for everyone. For everyone except me, our baby, and you." Christina's eyes filled with tears. "Damien, your life is falling apart because of me. The last thing you need is a scandal about your fake wife being pregnant. The last thing I need is to lose both you and our child, because you've decided what's best for me without asking my opinion." "What opinion could you possibly have? This is a disaster." Damien stepped closer, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. "This is a miracle. The woman I love is carrying my baby. How could that be anything but perfect? Because people will say I trapped you. They'll say I got pregnant on purpose to secure my position. Let them say whatever they want. I know the truth." "What truth?" "That I love you. That I want to marry you, really marry you, not for any contract or business arrangement, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it. That I want to raise our child together and grow old together and build something real and lasting." Tears were streaming down Christina's face now. "The board will never accept this. Your father will disown you. Then I'll build a new company and find a new family, but I won't lose you again." "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Damien's thumbs wiped away her tears. "I understand that you're scared. I understand that you think you're protecting me. But what you don't understand is that losing you nearly destroyed me. These past 3 weeks have been the worst of my life." "Mine too," Christina admitted in a broken whisper. "Then stop running. Stop deciding what's best for everyone else and tell me what you want." "I want you. I want our baby. I want the life we started building before everything got so complicated." "Then stay. Marry me for real this time. Help me raise our child and rebuild whatever we need to rebuild." Christina searched his face, looking for lies or false promises. Whatever she found there satisfied her, because she leaned into his touch with a shuddering sigh. "The board meeting is Monday. I know. You might lose everything. I already lost everything when you left. Everything else is just business. And if we do this, if we try to build something real, there's no going back. No contract with an end date. No escape clauses." "I don't want escape clauses. I want forever." Christina's smile was watery but genuine. "Forever sounds terrifying. Forever sounds perfect." When he kissed her there in the middle of Central Park, with Saturday afternoon sunlight streaming around them and their future growing inside her, it felt like a beginning rather than a continuation. This wasn't the careful, contractual kiss of their wedding day or the passionate surrender of the Hamptons weekend. This was a promise, a commitment, a choice made freely by 2 people who had found each other in the most unexpected circumstances and decided that what they built was worth fighting for. I love you. Christina whispered against his lips. I love you too. Both of you. His hand found her still flat stomach, and Christina covered it with her own. Whatever happened Monday, whatever the board decided, or the media wrote, or Elizabeth Fairmont attempted, they would face it together. The fake marriage was over. The real one was just beginning. Monday morning arrived with the weight of destiny. Damien sat in the boardroom at Heartland Industries, Christina beside him for the first time in 3 weeks. She'd insisted on attending the vote, despite his concerns about subjecting her to potential hostility. We're in this together now, she'd said that morning over breakfast. Whatever happens, we face it as a team. Elizabeth Fairmont entered the boardroom like a conquering general, her confidence radiating across the mahogany table. She'd clearly expected to find Damien alone and vulnerable, not flanked by the woman whose disappearance was supposed to have sealed his fate. Mrs. Heartland, Elizabeth said with barely concealed surprise. How unexpected to see you here. Miss Fairmont, Christina replied with perfect composure. I wouldn't miss such an important day in my husband's career. The board members filed in, with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. Robert Heartland took his seat at the head of the table, his face revealing nothing about his feelings regarding his son's surprise reunion with his controversial wife. Before we proceed with the vote, Damien announced, standing as the room settled, I'd like to make a statement. Harrison Wells nodded. The floor is yours. Damien looked around the table, at faces he'd known for years. Men and women who'd watched him grow up, who'd supported his rise to leadership, who now questioned everything they thought they knew about his character. 3 months ago, I made a decision that many of you view as a betrayal of trust. I entered into a contract marriage with Christina Fletcher to project an image of stability that would help the company weather Elizabeth Fairmont's hostile takeover attempt. Murmurs rippled around the table. Elizabeth's smile grew more predatory. That decision was calculated, strategic, and completely selfish. I was more concerned with winning than with integrity, more focused on beating Elizabeth than on upholding the values this company was founded on. Christina's hand found his under the table, offering silent support. But something unexpected happened during those 90 days. The fake marriage became real. The strategic partnership became genuine love. The business arrangement became the most authentic relationship of my life. How convenient, Elizabeth interjected, claiming love after being exposed. You're right to be skeptical, Damien acknowledged. My credibility is damaged, perhaps beyond repair. But I'm not standing here today asking you to trust my words. I'm asking you to judge my actions. He gestured to Christina, who stood gracefully beside him. Christina Fletcher could have disappeared permanently when the scandal broke. She could have taken her money and vanished, leaving me to face the consequences alone. Instead, she's here, risking her own reputation to stand with me. That's not the behavior of someone who was merely playing a part. Or it's the behavior of someone protecting her investment, Elizabeth countered. Christina spoke for the first time, her voice calm and clear. Miss Fairmont, I'd like to address that concern directly. She reached into her briefcase and withdrew a thick document, placing it on the table. This is a legal statement relinquishing any claim to Damien's assets, any position in this company, and any financial benefit from our relationship. I've also established a trust to return the $2 million from our original contract, including interest. Shocked silence filled the room. Even Elizabeth looked taken aback. Furthermore, Christina continued, I'm announcing my resignation from all consulting work related to Heartland Industries. I want there to be no question about my motivations or any potential conflicts of interest. Christina, you don't have to. Damien started, but she silenced him with a look. I do have to. Because I love this company almost as much as I love your son, Mr. Heartland. She looked directly at Robert. Your grandfather built something extraordinary. Not just a business, but a legacy of integrity and community service. I won't be the reason that legacy is tarnished. Robert's expression softened slightly. Around the table, board members were looking at Christina with new interest. The question, Christina said, turning back to the group, isn't whether our marriage started as a business arrangement. It did. The question is whether Damien Hartland has become the kind of leader who deserves your trust going forward. She activated the room's presentation screen, revealing a comprehensive analysis that made Damien's heart race with recognition and pride. In the 3 months since I've been working with this company, I've watched Damien implement changes that have increased employee satisfaction by 32%, improved community relations dramatically, and positioned Heartland Industries for sustainable growth that honors both profit and principle. The slides show detailed metrics, employee testimonials, community impact assessments, and financial projections that painted a picture of transformed leadership. The philanthropy initiatives he developed aren't just tax strategies, they're genuine investments in the communities where Heartland Industries operates. The employee wellness programs he instituted have reduced turnover and increased productivity. The sustainable business practices he's championed have attracted new investors who share your grandfather's values. Elizabeth's confidence was visibly wavering as Christina presented slide after slide of documented improvements. More importantly, Christina continued, I've watched him earn the respect and loyalty of every person who works for this company, not through fear or manipulation, but through genuine care for their well-being and their futures. She clicked to the final slide, which showed a simple statement. Leadership isn't about perfection. It's about growth. Damien made a mistake. He chose strategy over honesty, and that choice had consequences. But the measure of a leader isn't whether he never makes mistakes. It's whether he learns from them and becomes better. Christina returned to her seat, leaving the room in contemplative silence. That was quite a presentation, Harrison Wells said finally, but it doesn't address the fundamental issue of trust. How can we be certain that future decisions will be made with integrity rather than expediency? Damien stood again, knowing this was his moment to either save or lose everything. You can't be certain. Trust, once broken, has to be rebuilt through consistent action over time. All I can offer you is my commitment to transparency, my dedication to this company's values, and my promise that every decision I make going forward will be measured against one question. Would my grandfather be proud? He paused, looking around the table at faces he'd known since childhood. But I also want you to know that if you vote no confidence in my leadership today, I'll accept that decision with grace. This company is bigger than any individual, including me. However, I won't pretend that losing your trust doesn't devastate me, or that I don't believe I can still contribute meaningfully to our shared legacy. Robert Hartland spoke for the first time since the meeting began. The question before us isn't just about Damien's leadership, it's about what kind of company we want to be. Do we want to be led by someone who's never made a mistake, or by someone who's learned from his mistakes and become stronger? He looked directly at his son. I've watched Damien these past 3 months, and I've seen changes that go far beyond business strategy. I've seen him become more thoughtful, more collaborative, more genuinely concerned about the people affected by our decisions. If that growth came from his relationship with Christina, then perhaps their unconventional beginning was exactly what he needed. Elizabeth made one final attempt to seize control. This is all very touching, but the facts remain unchanged. Damien Hartland deceived this board, deceived investors, and deceived the public. How can we possibly— Miss Fairmont, interrupted board member Brenda Denning. I think we've heard enough from you for one day. The elderly woman's crisp voice cut through Elizabeth's protests like a blade. You've spent months trying to convince us that Damien was unfit to lead this company. But watching this young woman sacrifice her own interests to defend him, seeing the documented improvements in every metric that matters, listening to employees who genuinely respect and trust him, I'm beginning to wonder if your real concern is Damien's fitness to lead, or your own desire for power. Other board members murmured agreement. Elizabeth's face flushed with anger and frustration. Furthermore, Brenda continued, if this vote is truly about integrity and values, then I suggest we examine all our options carefully, including whether someone who's attempted a hostile takeover through manipulation and character assassination is really the kind of leader we want anywhere near this company. The tide in the room had shifted dramatically. What had begun as Damien's trial had become Elizabeth's reckoning. I call for the vote, Harrison Wells announced. One by one, the board members cast their ballots. When the count was finished, Harrison smiled for the first time all morning. The motion of no confidence fails by a vote of 8-3. Damien Hartland retains his position as CEO of Heartland Industries. Relief flooded through Damien so powerfully he nearly collapsed. Christina's hand squeezed his, her smile radiant with joy and pride. But the victory celebration was interrupted by Robert Hartland clearing his throat. "If I may," he said, standing slowly, "I'd like to make an announcement of my own." The room fell silent, waiting. Effective immediately, I'm stepping down as chairman of the board and turning full control of Heartland Industries over to my son. Robert's eyes met Damien's across the table. Today has proven to me that he doesn't need my oversight anymore. He's become the leader I always hoped he'd be. Damien felt tears threaten for the first time all morning. "Dad, and Christina," Robert continued, "I owe you an apology. I judged you based on circumstances rather than character, and I was wrong. You've shown more integrity in one morning than Elizabeth Fairmont has demonstrated in months of scheming." Elizabeth, realizing her defeat was complete, gathered her materials with sharp, angry movements. "This isn't over," she warned as she headed for the door. "Yes, it is," Brenda Denning replied firmly. "And Miss Fairmont, don't let the door hit you on your way out." After Elizabeth's departure, the mood in the room transformed completely. Board members who'd been skeptical an hour earlier were now congratulating Damien and welcoming Christina back to the family. "I hope you'll reconsider your resignation from consulting work with us," Harrison Wells told Christina. "Your insights this morning were invaluable." "Thank you, but no. I meant what I said about avoiding conflicts of interest." Christina's smile was warm but firm. "Besides, I'll have other priorities soon." She exchanged a meaningful look with Damien, who couldn't suppress his grin. "Other priorities?" Robert asked curiously. "We have an announcement," Damien said, standing and pulling Christina up beside him. "Christina and I are expecting a baby." The reaction was instantaneous and overwhelmingly positive. Robert's face lit up with the first genuine smile Damien had seen from him in months. "A grandchild," he said wonderfully. "When?" "Early spring," Christina replied, unconsciously placing her hand on her still flat stomach. Brenda Denning raised her coffee cup in a toast to new beginnings, stronger leadership, and the next generation of Heartlands. 6 months later, Damien and Christina stood before the same altar where they'd first exchanged vows. But everything was different. Christina's pregnancy was beginning to show in the flowing silk of her wedding dress. And when she walked down the aisle, she carried white roses from the gardens at the Heartland estate. This time, when they said "I do," there were no contracts, no time limits, no business arrangements. There were only two people who'd found each other in the most unexpected circumstances and chosen love over fear, authenticity over strategy, forever over convenience. "You may kiss your wife," the minister announced, and when Damien's lips met Christina's, it tasted like promises kept and dreams fulfilled. The reception was held at the family estate in the Hamptons, where they'd first admitted their love during that thunderstorm months earlier. But today, sunshine streamed through the gardens, where their family and friends celebrated not just a wedding, but a triumph of hope over cynicism. "Any regrets?" Christina asked as they swayed together during their first dance as a truly married couple. "Only one," Damien replied, pulling her closer. "I wish I could go back and tell that desperate man who hired a fake wife that he was about to meet the love of his life. He wouldn't have believed you." "Probably not. But maybe he would have appreciated the journey more." Christina laughed, the sound bright and joyful. "I love our journey. Every complicated, impossible, beautiful moment of it. Even the part where you tried to disappear forever. Especially that part. It taught me that some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds seem impossible. Like us. Like us." As they danced under the stars, surrounded by the people who mattered most, Damien realized that their fake marriage had taught them the most valuable lesson of all. That real love isn't something you can contract for or strategize into existence. It's something you choose, every day, despite the risks and complications and impossible odds. Christina Fletcher had been hired to play the role of his wife for 90 days. But somewhere between the boardroom negotiations and charity galas, between elevator almost kisses and thunderstorm confessions, she'd become something far more valuable than any business arrangement could have provided. She'd become his partner, his equal, his home. And in 7 months, she'd become the mother of his child, a little girl they'd name after Damien's grandmother, carrying forward the legacy of strong women who'd shaped the Heartland family for generations. Their story had begun with a contract, but it would continue with something far more binding, a love story that proved sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. Think about the relationships in your own life. Have you ever discovered that the most meaningful connections came from the most surprising circumstances? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for tomorrow's story about second chances and the courage to love again.